Hey there, it's Sassy in the Word. I was recently doing my Bible reading and I was in 1 Kings chapter 18. And I love the history books in the Bible. And in that particular chapter, some things jumped out at me that I wanted to share with you. So this session today, I want to look at it with 3 points: courage, cowardice, and a cloud. So that's our title. Courage, cowardice, and a cloud. So with a little bit of background on this, we have the kingdom is split. There are 10 tribes that are considered the tribes of Israel. And then there are 2 southern tribes, which are called the tribes of Judah. And Israel is currently, in this session, being ruled by King Ahab. And we are told of King Ahab that he is not a good guy. It tells us in chapter 16, verse 30, Ahab, son of Omri, did what was evil in the Lord's sight even more than any of the kings before him. So that's the climate we're in. That's the culture we're in when we hit chapter 18. And it tells us that at the beginning of chapter 18, Elijah comes and he tells Ahab, essentially because Ahab is worshiping false gods. He's turning the hearts of Israel away from the one true God. Elijah comes and tells him, the Lord has told me to tell you there will be no rain for 3 years until I say so. And then with that, Elijah quickly left, because you can imagine that was not a message that was well received. And Elijah went and he disappeared. And for an unknown period of time, he stayed at this place called the Brook Cherith, or Kerith. There's a couple of different ways to look at that. And while he's there, the ravens are bringing him food. And he's got water by the brook. He's being attended to by these ravens, and he's doing okay. And then with the drought, the brook dries up. So God tells Elijah, go to Zarephath. There's a widow there, and you will stay with her. He gets to Zarephath. The widow says, yeah, I'm getting ready to die. I am out of food supplies. This is the last of my oil. This is the last of my flour. I'm going to make some bread, feed my son, and then we're both basically going to wait to die. And Elijah says, well, make that for me, and let me come stay with you, and you're going to make it through. You're going to be okay. She agrees, she does what he asks, and then when Elijah stays with her, it turns out her small supply of oil and flour never runs out. She never depletes those food resources for the entire rest of the drought. She's able to provide for herself, she's able to provide for her son, and she's able to provide for Elijah. So here we get to chapter 18 in 1 Kings. And it says, so the Lord said to Elijah, go present yourself to King Ahab. Again, it says, it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, because we had been told 3 years of drought, saying, go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth. So it is, God has said it. The interesting thing I find here is Elijah obeyed. Quick obedience, not, Lord, he's going to want to kill me. This might not go well. Are you sure? It simply says, Elijah obeyed. Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. So in 18, I hope you read it, he's traveling toward Ahab, and on the way, he meets a servant of Ahab's who is also a man of God, which that's a side note, but so you can be a God follower in a difficult, godless situation, and it doesn't have to change you. You can still follow God even in difficult circumstances, or godless employment, or in a godless community, or whatever it may be. You can still follow God. So Elijah's on his way to see Ahab. Out comes this servant of Ahab's, Obadiah. And Obadiah has been instructed by Ahab to go and scour the country, look for grass to feed the mules and the horses so that we can try to keep them alive and survive this drought. And so Obadiah sees Elijah. Oh, my fellow believer. Not exactly, because it's Old Testament, but he was excited to see him as a fellow follower of God. And they greet each other. And then Elijah says, go tell Ahab, Elijah is here and Elijah's coming. Obadiah goes, no, don't make me do that. Don't make me do that. Ahab has been looking for you all over the country. He is looking for you. He is not happy with you. If I go back and tell him Elijah's here, but then you disappear for some reason, you get caught up in the Spirit of the Lord, you disappear, he will kill me. Elijah says, nope, it's okay. Do what I've told you. Go back and tell him. So sure enough, Obadiah went to meet Ahab, and then Ahab goes to meet Elijah. And I love this. Ahab confronts Elijah and says, is it you troubler of Israel? How familiar does that sound, right? Ahab is the problem, but he wants to blame shift and put that on Elijah, telling Elijah, you're the problem. And Elijah says, no, I have not troubled Israel. It's you and your father's house, in that you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and have followed the Baals. So Elijah does not take on that false accusation, turns it back around, and now he issues a challenge. Elijah tells him, go gather the people of Israel, gather the prophets of Baal, gather the prophets of Asherah, who was another false god of the time in the region. Get all of those people together and come meet me at the top of Mount Carmel. This is the courage that I speak of, because it's basically just Elijah. He's coming up with the whole kingdom of Israel is going to be there, or everybody who chose to attend. 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. They are all, and a king who wants to kill him. So they are all meeting Elijah at the top of Mount Carmel. And Elijah challenges them. He says, build an altar. I'll do the same. We'll build these altars. We'll put our sacrifices on there. We'll both pray to our gods. And whomever's God answers, that's the one true God. So everybody agreed. That's what we're going to do. They build their stone altars. They put wood on it. They put their sacrifice on it. And they have them all ready. The people of Israel are there. And Elijah, before all these hundreds, even thousands of people, says, people of Israel, how long are you going to waver between two schools of thought? How long are you going to be wishy-washy, double-minded? If God is the one true God, then follow him. But if it's Baal, if Baal is God, then follow him. So Elijah stands up, makes that challenge to the people, and he is standing solo before this multitude of people. This is where the courage comes in. I have never been asked to stand solo in front of hundreds or thousands of people and give witness to my faith in my God. Hasn't happened. I've also never even had to stand before a small group of angry people and defend my faith or defend my relationship with God and why I believe the Bible. I've never had to do that with a hostile group. And yet here Elijah is. Now, I have had a few occasions to stand before someone on a one-to-one and give my perception as a Bible-believing Christian, some of whom have been unfriendly, some of whom have been angry, but my life has never been at risk like Elijah's was. I'll say yet. Times may change. You never know what's going to happen. But I do think about, when thinking about courage, what about the opportunities that I've missed? The coworkers who openly blaspheme God. Do I stay silent like the people in Israel did? We're going to talk about that more in just a moment. Or do I respond? Do I have courage like Elijah had courage? Do I have the courage necessary, even in a relatively safe environment, to speak up and identify as a Christian, a follower of God, a believer in the Bible? Courage. It's important. It's necessary. I hope that in reading this and in talking about this, we walk away with a sense of the importance of courage and the desire to act with courage. But the Israelites, how did they respond? So Elijah has said, if it's God, follow him. If it's Baal, follow him. And it says in chapter 18, verse 21, it says, but the people were completely silent. This is that second point, the cowardice that I spoke of. Completely silent. So cowardice, I think of some different examples in the Bible. I think of Abraham and Isaac in Genesis 20 and Genesis 26, where both of them on separate occasions acted cowardly and spoke of their wives and said, she's my sister, not my wife. She's my sister. Because they were afraid. They were afraid of what the king in the land they were going to would do to them if they identified as the spouse of such a beautiful woman. I also think of Barak in Judges 4. He was afraid to go and fight and confront an enemy. And so he approached Deborah, who was the judge of Israel at the time, or a judge of Israel at the time, and says, okay, I'll go and fight and I'll go and confront, but only if you go with me. And Deborah responded in Judges 4, I will go. Again, so he's been promised victory. If we go back and look at that in Judges 4, God has already promised he's going to win, but I don't want to go unless Deborah goes. And so Deborah finally says, I will go with you, but you will receive no honor in this venture, for the Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman. So again, Barak acted with cowardice. He was afraid and he let that fear get the best of him. But maybe the prime example of cowardice is Peter, when he denies Jesus right before Jesus's arrest and crucifixion. It's predicted in Matthew 26, verses 31 through 34. Jesus predicted, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the night's over. And of course, Peter, no, not me, Lord, everybody else, but not me. But then it's fulfilled in the very same chapter, Matthew 26, verses 69 through 75, when confronted by the servant girl, by the group at the fire, by the soldiers, Peter's afraid. And he says, I don't know the man. I've never known him. He even uses foul language to disclaim his relationship with Jesus. Again, cowardice. And it's totally understandable. I get it. He was afraid. What about us? Have you had opportunity to act with courage and instead you responded with cowardice? I'm a firm believer that God gives second chances. And I think of opportunities I've had and I've failed or I've missed. One in particular that carries with me is I used to have a very high stress job. It was very high stress, but I kind of thrived on it and I did okay with it. But I had coworkers often, and I think of one in particular, say, how do you stay so calm with this? How do you keep calm? And I'm just kind of, it's just who I am, until God kind of convicted me one day and says, really? It's not really you. It's because of your confidence in me. It's because of your relationship with me. And so God and I made an agreement right then that if I ever got that chance again, if someone used that phrase with me again, how do you stay so calm? I had a better answer, and I could point them toward my relationship with Jesus. And sure enough, it wasn't a lot longer. Had it happened, somebody, how do you stay so calm? And I was able to say, it's not me. It's because my confidence is in the Lord. Nothing's going to happen to me that he's not already seen. And regardless of what happens, I'm his and it comes out okay in the end. All things work together for good to those who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose. So if you're discouraged because you have not given an appropriate answer, hang in there. Again, I firmly believe God's going to give you another chance to respond out of faith instead of fear. And so then we get to the third point in the chapter, and it's the cloud. So after they've built their altars, they call on the Lord's, their gods, and Elijah calls on his. Of course, nothing happens when they're calling on the false gods. When Elijah prays and calls on the one true God, fire comes down, immediately consumes the offering, the meat, the wood, the stones, the water that's around the trench of the altar, and even the dust. So all of that is immediately consumed. So showdown, God won, prophets of Baal did not. So now Elijah tells King Ahab, go eat and drink and get ready, because I hear the sound of abundant rain. Pretty cool when you think about it. Wasn't thundering. There was no rain. There was nothing that he heard. That's my dog in the background. Sorry about that. So Elijah, he tells the king, get ready. Rain's coming. He goes to the top of Mount Carmel again, which is where they had the showdown between the prophets of Baal and Asherah and the one true and living God. Elijah goes back up there and he prays. And then he tells his servant, go look toward the sea and see if you see anything. Servant goes and looks, come back, says, nope, don't see anything. So Elijah prays more. Again, tells his servant, go back, look, see if you see anything. Again, the servant comes back and says, no, I don't see anything. 6 times that happens. 6 times the servant comes back and reported nothing seen. Then on the seventh time, when Elijah tells his servant, go look, the servant comes back and he says, I see a cloud the size of a man's hand. So you think about it, he's looking so far out there and he sees this small cloud. Reports that to Elijah, and Elijah sent his servant to King Ahab to tell him, get in your chariot and get home before the coming rain stops you and you can't get home, because the rain is going to be that heavy and that much. So let's think about that cloud for a moment. Have you ever done that exercise where you look up in the clouds and you go, oh, that one looks like a dragon breathing smoke, or that one looks like a stop sign, or that one looks like a seal with a ball on its nose? I was never really good at that stuff. I guess I just didn't have enough imagination for it. But this particular cloud was the size of a man's hand. But I think Elijah saw something else in that cloud besides just the size of a man's hand. I think he saw God's faithfulness in that cloud. He had seen God's faithfulness all along when he was fed by the ravens and he didn't starve, he didn't do without. When he was living with the widow in Zarephath, and again, oil and flour never ran out, and he saw the restoration of life to the widow's son who had died while Elijah was staying with her. So the cloud was just one more example of God's ongoing, continuing faithfulness. God had said 3 years until there's rain, 3 years of drought. It has been 3 years. Here we are. And God is faithful. He keeps his promises. And that's what that cloud shows. Sometimes we're in the middle of difficulties. It's hard to remember that God is faithful. God keeps his promises. So I'm reminded of Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 and 23, where it says, through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I think of when God told the Israelites in the wilderness, none of you are going to enter the promised land except Caleb and Joshua because of your unbelief. he kept that promise. He was faithful to keep what he had told them. I think of when Jesus told his disciples, they are going to kill me, but don't worry, I'm coming back. And he kept that word. He kept that promise. He kept that commitment. And I know that when the Bible, the Word of God, when it promises that Jesus will eventually return, I know I can count on that. He is coming back. We can know he is faithful to keep that promise too. I get it. When in the trenches or dealing with battles, whether they're emotional or spiritual or physical or mental, these battles can keep us from remembering. It's easy to forget God's faithfulness. And I hope that that's what you leave this with, is he is faithful. So how do we remember that? 3 quick suggestions. Keep a journal. If you are part of a prayer group, I have a couple of friends I pray with regularly, write down the prayer request. Go back and mark when God answers something, and then you have an ongoing history of his faithfulness. Another easy to do thing would be write when something happens that you can see his faithfulness. Like maybe you're struggling to pay the bills that month and you get some unexpected money in, or you're praying for answered prayer for your wayward child or something like that. When you see God's faithfulness, write it on a sticky note, fold it up, put it in a jar. At the end of the year, it's great activity for New Year's Eve. At the end of the year, pull out that jar, go through those sticky notes, and remind yourself of God's faithfulness in the preceding year. Even something as simple as on your calendar. I do have a planner. Your calendar or your planner, write down when you see God's hand, when you see him being faithful. Keep something to remind you of that, memorialize that moment, and then you've got it that you can look back on and remember God's faithfulness. So what do you think? We have courage, we have cowardice, and we have courage, cowardice, and a cloud. Let me know what you think of 1 Kings 18. I've enjoyed it.